Alrighty, welcome back. We are done with the adjusted trial balance, and we're going to move on now to the general journal. And so the general journal is probably one of the more challenging pages. It's certainly one of the more time-intensive pages for phase two, so you want to make sure you start working on this as soon as you can, and give yourself plenty of time to get it done and not put it off to the last minute. So take a look at our general journal here. Let's zoom out just a second. Okay. So what we have here is we have our transaction number, and so notice that we have two rows for each transaction. We have the date, we have the account numbers involved in our transaction. We have the account title, so each title has a number assigned to it. We have the debit amount in our journal entry, and we have the credit amount in our journal entry. And then you also have an area where you can explain the reason or the intention or what's going on in the transaction. Say you get cash for a bank loan, you could say cash from bank loan for purchase of equipment or something like that. So you could explain the entry if you would like. You don't have to, but it's certainly there for you to do that. So we have two rows for our entry. That's because we have a debit row. We have our debit account here, and we have a debit value. And we have our credit row, and we have a credit account and our credit value. Notice that our credit cell, it equals the debit cell. That way our debits and credits always balance. We always want our debits and credits to balance and keep things in line. Our account titles are drop-down lists. Our account number is a VLOOKUP, so it's looking at the account title, and based on the account title, it's going to pull up an account number. The date we just simply typed in, and the transaction number is just no different really than having the PO number or invoice number, except for instead of going up every row, we're going up every other row. So here we're going to say whatever was in D25, which is two rows down, take that number plus 1, and then D23 and so forth. So we're going to go up two rows. On the bottom we have a sum equation, which is going all the way up, and it's including the title or our headings. And then again, we have a flag here, making sure that our debits and our credits balance. Okay, so I'm going to change the color of this just for a second. We're going to make this like that. Okay. And so now we're going to scroll over, and we have a lot of information over here. So remember, on the side of our sales and purchase journal, we had basically a tally or a heading for each product. And so we kept track of the number of units coming in and out for those products. Here what we're going to do is we're going to have a heading for each one of the accounts in our drop-down list for our account titles. And so you can see that there are a number of accounts there, so we're going to have a number of headings over here. And so instead of tracking any quantity, we're going to track a monetary value and then sum that up and say that the sum down here is the net change on our general journal entry to this account. And so I would add this net change to the adjusted trial balance value for cash, and that would bring me to my closing trial balance. And so this number could be positive or negative. It depends if I got more cash or I spent more cash. So that's what we're going to kind of do with that. And then we are going to have a number of accounts over here. Some of them are going to have two columns. And so one of those would be bank loan. We're going to have 4 accounts that are going to have 2 columns. So 2 of them are going to be investing accounts from our cash flow, and then 2 of them are going to be financing accounts from our cash flow. So we have bank loan, that's one of them, and we have land, that's the second one. So that's 2 of the 4 accounts that need 2 columns. And the reason for that is on our cash flow, we'll just go over there for a second. I want to know what's the purchase of land and what's the purchase of equipment and what's the sales of land and then the sales of equipment. I want to separate those things out. I don't want the net change in land and net change in equipment. I want to know what is the cash decrease that's equivalent to the purchase of land and what's the cash increase due to the sale of land or equipment. So we have two columns here. So remember we have on our general journal, we have a debit row. We also have a debit column. We have a credit row and a credit column. So you can kind of think of this as this being the debit row column for bank loan and this being the credit column in rows for the bank loan. So we're going to sum up basically the reduction in our bank loan and then the increase in our bank loan. Remember, the increase in our bank loan will generally increase our cash, and then the decrease in our bank loan is going to decrease our cash. And so that way we have things separated. So if I say the net change in bank loan this year was $100, I have no idea what transpired or what happened to get there. And so we can split that up and say, well, you had this many purchases or this much in sales, and the difference or the net change in the two, that led to this ending balance. And so that gives the users of the financial statements, be it internal or external, a little bit more information and clarity as to what the business is doing. Okay. So we have our table here. We are going to make this table now. We are going to make a macro for this. The macro is going to insert two lines, and then it's going to copy and paste up all the cells to every other cell. So we can't just simply drag up and down in this case. Okay, and you're going to see that with these if equations over here, we can't just simply drag or copy these ones up either. So this is where this page is a little bit more challenging. It's definitely a little bit more time consuming, but once you get the hang of it, it's not really that hard. It just takes a little time. So again, you want to make sure you give yourself the appropriate time to work on this. Okay, so we're going to go to book 1. We're going to have a new sheet. We're going to rename the sheet, and we're going to call it General Journal. You can also call it GJ if you want, whatever you want to do. And you want to go over and down at least 4 or 5 rows. You do need to leave the A and B column open. So make sure you at least go over to the C column, or I would say just to be safe, the D column. And so we're going to have our transaction number. We're going to have the date, the account number, and then we're going to have the we're going to have the account title. We're going to have the debit, and then the credit, and then you can explain what happened in the transaction. And so we're going to go down 2 rows because we're going to have 2 rows in each transaction, in each entry. We're going to bold that up, and we're just going to spread everything out here. Okay, and we're going to make sure it's all centered, make sure it's looking good. All right, bold that up there. Okay, so for the transaction, start out just by putting a 0 down here, and we're going to go up 2 rows and make this top row equal the 0 plus 1. Okay, pretty straightforward. You're just going to go down 2 rows and say plus 1 instead of 1 row. So really it's no different than our sales or our purchase journal for invoice and PO numbers. The date we're just going to put in the top row because again we have 2 rows for a transaction. We don't need the date in 2 places. We don't need to have the date twice for the same transaction. So we just have it once up here. We're going to copy and paste the value. We're going to have an account number, account title, debit, credit, and explain. So first we need to have the information though for our drop-down list for the account title and our information for the account numbers. And so those can come from a number of areas, either your beginning, adjusted, or closing trial balance. And we're just going to get them right now from our beginning trial balance. So I want you to just highlight all these accounts, and we're just going to say Control C. We're going to copy it, go to our general journal, and we're going to scroll down to say 50. Okay, and we're going to be in the A column, and we're going to paste the account titles. And now there's certain accounts that we don't need, and so we're going to get rid of those. One of them being AR. Our AR is already being updated on our receipts journal, so we don't need to double count that, so we're going to delete that. Inventory, same thing. We're going to buy and sell inventory on our purchase and sales journal, so we don't need that in our general journal. We don't want to double count anything. Whoop, that was one too many clicks. Meant to make sure. Okay. So far you should have AR and inventory deleted. We're going to go down to AP. I don't need AP either because, again, that's going to come from my payments journal. So I'm going to update my AP through my payments journal. So I can delete that. Retained earnings. We're not going to make any journal entries to retained earnings. We will, however, update retained earnings, but that's going to be done through net income in this statement of retained earnings. So you can delete that. You can also delete sales and cost of goods sold. Those, again, are going to come from our sales journal, so we don't want to double count those. And then we can go down and check and make sure we got everything that we need. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our beginning trial balance. And so we are going to select this cell. We're going to copy the 60 over to our general journal. And then just make sure that you have the correct account numbers with the correct account titles. And so we have prepaid all the way down to land. All right, and we can spread that out a little bit. And now we're down to unearned revenue. And it's going to go all the way down to common stock. Oh. And then we're going to have our expenses, starting with selling, and we're going to go down to income tax. And hopefully those should all line up, and indeed they do. So we need to have the account title first and then the account number. The reason for that is with the VLOOKUP equation, when we have a table array, we're always going to compare whatever's in the first column. And so the account number is going to be based on the account title. So we need to compare the title here to the title in our table up above, and then go over to the right so many rows and return that information. So that's why we need to have the account title first and then the account number. So we couldn't just simply copy and paste this because then the account number would be first. So that's why we took a little bit of time doing that. All right, so account title is going to be a data validation, and it's going to be a list, and we're going to highlight the range of that list. You can scroll down and make sure you look in the A column and just start and highlight that entire area. So you got all those accounts in there, and you can just click OK, enter, and I should be able to select some of these accounts. I can drag that down, and I have that drop-down list for both of them. We're not going to have different accounts in the debit or credit row because potentially I could debit or make a debit or a credit to any one of these accounts. And so we are going to have all the accounts in either the debit row and the credit row. So the VLOOKUP is going to be in our account number cell. So we're going to type that in. And our account number, as we said before, is going to be based on our account title. So we select our account title. That's the first thing we're going to compare. We're going to go down and select these account titles and go all the way over. And now we're going to absolute reference that. We're going to say comma, and we're going to say 2 because the account number is in the second column, if you see here. And then we're going to say comma and then false. All right, and right now we have a pound NA value, and that's simply because we don't have an account title selected yet. And so since we don't have an account title selected yet, we don't have any way to populate an account number. So not really anything to worry about right now, but we do want to error cover that, and so we're going to go ahead and put in our if equation in the beginning of that, and we're going to set the account title, if that equals nothing. We want the account number to do nothing, and if not, if it equals something, we want it to look at that VLOOKUP equation. And so we can drag that down. And so let's give it a shot. Let's say we get some cash by going to the bank and asking for a bank loan. So we got our cash, bank loan, and account number, and we got the date that it happened and the transaction. Okay? So then we would, put in some number for our debit amount, okay? And we want our credit to equal our debit. So I'm just going to make the credit cell equal the debit cell. And notice that I selected the debit cell, which is in the debit row, and it's lined up with the debit column. And the credit row, I have the amount here, and then it's lined up with the credit column. So just make sure you pay attention to that detail. That is important. All right, we're going to $sign those both, and we can put a control in here. We need to make sure that these cells equal nothing. Now, I can never type anything in here because when I have these sum equations down here, I want to make sure that the sum of everything is the same, that they're balanced, right? So we have that check. And so if I type anything down here, now they're not balanced, and so I don't like that. That's not good. So we need to have a control there. We're going to have a data validation, and it's going to be a custom validation. So we're going to customize a validation and say that this cell right here, it needs to equal nothing. It should never equal anything, right? So now I try and type anything in there, click enter, it's going to stop me. Even if it's letters or numbers, it doesn't matter. It's going to stop me. And so I can copy and paste that over to the credit, and hopefully it'll stop me there as well. So, and it does. Alrighty, now what we're going to do is we're going to make our flag here off to the side, and I'm going to say if the debit column equals the credit column, then say, and whenever you want to say anything, have it display a text. The text needs to be in quotation marks. So I'm going to say if they're balanced, I'm going to say you win. All right, you got it balanced. And I'm going to say if you don't have it balanced, I'm going to say you lose. All right. And put my quotation on there, and then my closing brackets. And now I win because I balance, which is always a nice feeling to know that you're a winner. Alrighty, I'm going to bold that so that stands out. So now I have my very first transaction row. I can change this to say cash, and maybe, no, let's say I'm going to have an expense. I'm going to have a rent expense, and I'm going to pay it with cash, okay? And spread that out a little bit. And so again, when I have those accounts selected, when I have the tallies over here on the side, that information is going to change. And so we're going to go ahead and start making those. Again, you need to have the titles of the columns in the same row as the title from your general journal table. So I'm going to go over here to the side. I'm going to go over this way to the side and select my first account, which is cash. I'm going to have an if equation here, and I'm going to say if this account here equals cash, absolute reference, same so far, no difference between our sales and purchase journal, we're tracking inventory, then tell me what's in the debit cell. If not, give me 0, okay? And so let's just say hypothetically that I drag this down and then I make a sum equation, sum it all up, include the title, there we go. So now, just to check, if I debit cash, my cash should go up, and then when I credit cash, it should go down. So if I debit and credit cash for the same amount, the net effect should be 0. So the net effect here, the sum cell, that's our net effect, should be 0. But it's not, right? And I have a 0 here too as well, and I put in an amount here, so what's the matter? Well, we said to display H8. Well, I don't have an amount here in this row in H8. I have it in I8. So I can't just simply drag that down. I got to change this. So you can drag it down and then go through and change it, or you can retype it, but you can't just simply drag it down and be done with it. So now the next thing is I debited and I credited cash. The net change should be 0, but it's not, all right? It's double, okay? It's what it should be. And so I need to make some kind of change. And so the way to think about this is, what kind of account is cash? Is it an asset or is it a liability? And it should be an asset. And assets, they generally carry a debit account or a credit account. And hopefully you know that assets carry a debit account, which means that when I make a debit, the value of the account should go up. When I make a credit, the value of the account should go down. And so when I debit this, this should be a positive number. When I credit in this row, this should be a negative number. So I can make this negative I8. I can also say 0 minus I8. I could also say I8 times negative 1. All right? However you want to do it, doesn't matter. So those are 3 of the ways that you can do it. Either way works, and now my net change is 0, and that's the way that it should be. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, make sure I don't lose anything. And so whenever you're going through and making these columns for the accounts, you always want to make a debit and a credit to them, and regardless of the account, whether it has a debit or a credit balance, or it's an asset or a liability, or a contra account, it doesn't matter. When you debit and credit any account, the net change should always be 0. Okay? So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a liability. And we're going to go down here and pick the very first one that we got, which is unearned revenue. Okay? And so again, I'm going to make that if equation and say if the account here equals unearned revenue, absolute reference, then tell me what's in the debit cell. If it doesn't equal, give me 0. Now remember, we got to select the credit cell here. So I'm going to say if the account equals the title, absolute reference, then tell me what's in the credit cell. If not, tell me 0. Okay, so I can drag that over. We're going to check and make sure that I can debit and credit unearned revenue, and the net change should be 0. And look, it's not. Okay, so here we got to think again. Does a debit increase unearned revenue, or does a debit decrease unearned revenue? And since unearned revenue is a liability account, it has a credit balance. And if you forget, go to one of your trial balances. The answer is right there in front of you, unearned revenue. It has a balance here in the credit column. That must mean it's probably a liability, and a credit would make it go up. A debit to this account would make it go down. So if I go back to my general journal, we said that a credit to the account makes it go up. So this should be positive. So this is fine. A debit, however, should make it go down. So this should be negative. So I need to make this negative H7. So here I have H7, negative H7. Here I have negative I. Here I just have normal I. And so depending whether it's a asset or a liability or an equity account or an expense, whatever, depending on whether it carries a debit or a credit balance, it's going to change. And then regardless of that, each row is going to change because you have a debit and credit values. Okay? So again, we have the debit and credit. Net change is 0. We are golden. So last thing we're going to do here before we record the macro is we have those 4 accounts that you remember that we need to have 2 columns for, because on the cash flow we're going to have the investing and financing section, and I want to track just the increases and then track just the decreases in that account. I want to split it up. I want more information than just the net change. I want to know what happened, what got me to the ending value, that net change, what led up to that number. So I'm going to make this equal, and I'm going to go down and pick one of the accounts, and let's just say bank loan. Okay, and then I can make this cell also equal bank loan, so that they both equal bank loan, because we're going to have, remember, the debit column and the credit column to bank loan. And I'm going to say if, let's scroll over here a little bit, if the account equals bank loan up here, absolute reference, then tell me what's in the debit. And remember, bank loan is a liability, which means that it carries a credit balance, which means that a debit would reduce it. So I need to multiply this by -1 or put a negative in front of it. If they don't equal, tell me 0. I'm not going to put anything in this cell because this is my credit row, but I'm only tracking stuff for the debit to bank loan. So I'm not going to have anything in here. I'm just going to put the quotation marks in there, which means nothing, and just as a reminder to you that nothing should be in there. Okay? And we're going to do the same thing up here. It should have nothing in that cell. All right. So now we're going to say if this account title, the second row, equals this heading, absolute reference, then tell me the credit. And now the credit to a bank loan, being that it's a liability, it carries a credit balance. A credit will increase it. It should be a positive number. I don't need to have a negative there. If they don't equal, say 0. Okay, drag that sum equation across. And now if I debit and credit bank loan, the net change should be 0. And so I have negative 1230 and positive 1230. If I added those two numbers together, then the net change would be 0. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. You need to do this for the rest of the accounts. So all these accounts down here, including the expenses, need to have a heading. They need to have if equations that work. And my advice is to go through each one when you're done and debit and credit the account and make sure that the net change is 0. If you forget which ones have a debit or a credit balance, again, look at your trial balance. You should be able to figure it out there and see that, okay, cash has a debit balance, then it should have a debit account. Debit would increase it. And just as a note, cash is the only account that's going to get updated 2 times. So the cash got updated on the adjusted trial balance via the payments and receipts journal. It's also going to get updated on the closing trial balance through the general journal. So that's the only account that's going to be updated in 2 places. All the other accounts are going to get updated either through the journals from phase 1 or from the journals in phase 2. So, but nonetheless, everything will flow through to the closing trial balance at some point and eventually onto the financial statements. All right. So that is it. We got our general journal and all of our formulas. The last thing you need to do is make a macro. So we're just going to do that quickly. We're going to record macro, call it GJ for general journal. Click OK. We are going to insert 2 rows, and we are going to copy the cell, go up 2, type in the equals to date, and make sure we have a closing parenthesis there. Make sure you actually click the shift key. We're going to unbold, copy, and paste the value so the date is fixed. We can copy this equation all the way up because it's a VLOOKUP, doesn't matter. We can also copy up the titles all the way up, doesn't matter. The debit, however, needs to go up, and then this blank cell needs to go up to, same thing for the credit. Copy it, go up 2, and then this blank cell, copy it, and go up 2. We're going to delete the debit and also both of these accounts because we may select a different value. We're going to also delete whatever is in the explanation cell. And then we need to copy and paste all this information up. So we're going to copy it up to every other row. And so after a while, you'll see that you can get very quick at this if you just take some time with it. Okay, and so you will have a number of accounts here, so you shouldn't really worry about recording the macro yet until you have all these accounts over here all filled out. So I'm just showing you right now how to do it. You're going to start with putting in the account title, and so we're going to go now to the view and stop recording. We can insert a shape, and we can assign the macro to it. We're going to call it GJ, and we're going to just call this edit text. We're going to call it new entry. Okay, I'm going to make sure this is a little bit larger so you can actually read it. There you go. And if I run that, then I have 2 rows and everything is filled out, and I should be able to, let's see, yep, I should be able to have all my accounts there and fill that information in. I shouldn't be able to type anything in those equations. Okay, I should still balance, and again I can fill this out and say land, and let's say cash. Okay, and then depending on whether you have those accounts over here or not, they should be filled out properly. Okay, that is it for the general journal. Make sure you have all of these accounts down here. Make sure you have columns for them, tally headings, so you're going to be tracking all those. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get going on the closing trial balance. And after that, we'll go to the financial statements. And believe it or not, we will almost be done with this project. So good job, and we will see you soon.